What Makes a YouTube Video Viral by MrBeast. I spent basically 5 years of my life locked in a room studying virality on YouTube. Some days, me and some other nerds would spend 20 hours straight studying the most minor thing. Like, is there a correlation between better lighting at the start of a video and less viewer drop-off? There is. Have good lighting at the start of the video, haha. Or other tiny things like that. And the result of those probably 20,000 to 30,000 hours of studying is, I'd say I have a good grasp on what makes YouTube videos do well. The 3 metrics you guys need to care about is click-through rate, called CTR, average view duration, called AVD, and average view percentage, AVP. Make sure you know those abbreviations because that's how most people will refer to them. Up first, we'll talk about CTR. This is important no matter what department you work in. CTR, click-through rate, it's basically how many people see our thumbnail in their feeds divided by how many people click it. If 100 million people see our thumbnail and 10 million people click on it, then that means 10% clicked and that we have a 10% CTR. This is what dictates what we do for videos. I spent 50 hours in my front yard is lame and you wouldn't click on it. But you would hypothetically click, I spent 50 hours in ketchup. Both are relatively similar in time and effort, but the ketchup one is easily 100 times more viral. An image of someone sitting in ketchup in a bathtub is exponentially more interesting than someone sitting in their front yard. Titles are equally important for getting someone to click. A simple way to up that CTR even would be to title it I survived instead of I spent. That would add more intrigue and make it feel more extreme. In general, the more extreme, the better. I don't like bananas won't perform the same as bananas are the worst food on earth. Now, if you're in production or a creative, you might be wondering, why does a title and thumbnail matter to me? Expectations is why. The title and the thumbnail on the videos you will be producing set the expectations for the viewer for your video. Imagine you clicked on a video called World's Largest Bouncy Castle, and the thumbnail had a giant yellow bouncy castle beside a bunch of huge buildings. Then when the video plays, it's not a yellow bouncy castle, it's red. It's also not the world's largest. It's also in a field with no buildings, unlike what's in the thumbnail. You'd feel you were lied to and click off because the video did not meet the expectations of the title/thumbnail. This is why you must know the title and thumbnails of the videos you are making. How can you know how to start your video if you don't even know what expectations the viewers have of you? This is chapter 1 of a super dense 36-page internal memo MrBeast wrote for his entire company. The memo is called How to Succeed in MrBeast Production. I'm going to be reading a bunch of different passages from it on the show. This is the first biggest passage, and it is amazing. If you want to read the whole thing for yourself, the link is in the description for the show. And quick announcement, I've gotten a lot of requests for people who want to be on this podcast. If you want to be on the podcast, I set up a submission form. You can go to edwardspod.com. Scroll to the bottom and there's a link to guest on the show. I will be taking guests once my product, Compact Keywords, is fully released. Back to MrBeast. Now let's jump over to the second metric that matters, AVD. This is how long on average people watch a given video. The cool thing about YouTube is they give us super detailed graphs for every video that show the exact second we lose a viewer on every single video. And then there's an image of a retention graph. MrBeast says, see that blue line in the graph above? That represents the attention span of the 60 million people that clicked on this video. It's crazy, but we can see exactly when every single person who clicked on this video clicks off. As with almost every video on YouTube, the first minute has the most loss. This is why we freak out so much about the first minute and go so above and beyond to make it the best we freaking can. On this particular video, we lost 21 million viewers in the first minute of the video, which surprisingly compared to other channels is above average. And it could have been much worse. Let's say the start of the video wasn't well lit, or I didn't match the expectations of the clickbait, or I didn't pre-plan what I would say, and we didn't front load some interesting stuff for the first minute of content. We would have lost much less than 21 million people because it wouldn't have even gotten 21 million views. But if the views were hypothetically fixed, then instead of having 39 million viewers at the 1 minute mark, it would be more like 20 million viewers. The first minute of each video is the most important minute of each video. I'll say that again, and I've learned this myself the hard way. The first minute of each video is the most important minute of each video. After the first minute of content, you will have what we call minutes 1 through 3. This is where you have to transition from hype to execution generally. Stop telling people what they will be watching and start showing them. An example of a 1 through 3 minute tactic we would use is crazy progression. Let's say we have a 10-minute video about a guy surviving weeks in the woods. Instead of making the first 3 minutes of the video about his first day, then progressing from there like a logical filmmaker would, we would cover multiple days in the first 3 minutes of the video, so the viewer is now super invested in the story. They've seen this man survive multiple days in the woods, and emotionally now they want to see how much further he can go. We also want to do something around the 3-minute mark called a 3-minute re-engagement. A re-engagement can be described as content that is highly interested, that fits the story, and makes people genuinely impressed. Another way to look at this is it's a segment that only MrBeast can do, but really it's a crazy segment that gets people impressed, thinking there's no way they're going to do this. It's important to re-engage the viewer around the 3-minute mark because they could get bored of the story and click off. These re-engagements are usually spectacles, and sometimes they need a lot of time and money to perfect. A good example of a re-engagement is when Carl was put in charge of watching Josh in the $10,000 Every Day You Survive prison video. Following the first minute, then minutes 1 through 3, is obviously what we call minute 3 through minute 6, and is the next most important part of the video. This is where you plan out all the most exciting and interesting content that is also very simple. This includes lots of quick scene changes and highly stimulating, simple content that reflects the story. The goal is to make them fall in love with the story, the people in the video, and the overall video itself. If we can get them to watch the first half of the video, then there's a very high chance they'll watch to the end. Usually at the 6-minute mark, we will include another re-engagement that is highly interesting but needs a little more explanation, and will push the story in the back half of the video. And lastly, we have what we call the back half content. I have to be careful writing this because I don't want you ever for a second to think I am okay with content being subpar. Many videos have been killed because the back half content was ass, lol. But in general, once you have someone for 6 minutes, they are super invested in the story and probably are in what I call a lull. They are watching the video without even realize they are watching a video. Typically, the not as good content would be in the back half of the video. Don't ever signal the end of a video unless it's to build hype for the prize or payoff at the end of the video. This is also where long explanation bits can live, and if something unexpected happens or things don't go to plan, that can be turned into content. This is why you will hear us ask what minute mark in the video you are working on. Whether it is production, creative, or editing, you must always know what minute mark the content you are working on is. If you don't, then you're not doing it right. I just whipped out a calculator, and the combined seconds of content of our last 100 videos is 81,801 seconds, which divided by 100 means the average MrBeast video is 818 seconds or 13 minutes and 37 seconds. Some videos are shorter, like when we do a real-time shoot or something more emotional and don't want it dragged out, and some are longer, giant spectacles like giving away an island, for example. But 13 minutes is the average, and you are expected to know when producing which minute of that 13 minutes you are working on. And since we're on the topic of retention graphs, here is a cool visual. So if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, MrBeast shares pretty basic retention graphs, and I'm going to describe them to you. But if you ever looked at a retention graph for a video, you'll immediately know what is being described. The shape of the audience retention graph can tell you which parts of your video are most and least interesting to viewers. When the line on the chart is flat, it means viewers are watching that part of your video from start to finish. A gradual decline means viewers are losing interest over time. All videos on YouTube generally taper off during the playback period. Spikes in the retention graph appear when more viewers are watching or rewatching or sharing those parts of your video. Dips in the retention graph mean viewers are abandoning or skipping that specific part of your video. The last of the 3 trackable metrics that matters to virality is AVP, average view percentage, and to be honest, this doesn't matter as much to you. And again, this is MrBeast writing this to his team. So he says, usually the length of the video will be decided by me or Tyler. I just need you to make people watch as long as possible. Now, if you are making your own videos, it matters a lot to you. And that's who this episode is for. This is for people who are doing content marketing with videos, or creators who are trying to make the best videos that they can. Another non-trackable thing about virality I'd like you to know is what we call the wow factor. Oh, this part is so good. And it is definitely the most subjective. You can check all the above boxes for click-through rate and average view duration, but the video could still be for us. An example of the wow factor would be our 100 days in the circle video. We offered someone $500,000 if they could live in a circle in a field for 100 days, and instead of starting with his house in the video that he would live in, we brought it in on a crane 30 seconds into the video. Why? Because who the fuck else on YouTube can do that, LOL? The fact that we lifted a house on a crane didn't add anything to the title and the thumbnail. It obviously hooked the viewers and helped retention, but there are millions of ways we could have done that easier. It is arguably, from a data standpoint, illogical and a waste of time, but the impression it leaves on the viewer is invaluable for us. Anytime we do something that no other creator can do, that separates us in their mind and makes our videos more special to them, it changes how they see us, and it does make them watch more videos and engage more with the brand. You can't track the wow factor, but I can describe it. Anything that no other YouTuber can do, and it is important that we never lose our wow. I got this memo from Sean Purry of the My First Million podcast. He shared it in his newsletter, and he said of the wow factor, and I really like the way that he describes it. He goes back into the house being dropped. So he says, the video starts with him dropping the house into the circle using a giant crane. And halfway through the video, he took a giant saw and cut the house in half. These were not necessary. In fact, they are nuts. If you had a CFO in charge, a chief financial officer in charge, they would immediately cut these unnecessary risks and expenses. But MrBeast knows the wow factor matters. My friend George Mack says, only the weird behaviors get remembered. And that is why I make this podcast every day, because who else does a daily podcast? And how many people are recording their podcasts in public the way that I'm recording it now? I actually didn't go out to this place to record. I had lunch here and then I said, all right, I'm going to record. This is as good a place as any. I'm going to do it. I'm feeling great. I love this document. It is shared in the description for this episode. For anyone making video content, this is super useful. This is episode 447 of The Edward Show. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And I will talk to you again tomorrow. Bye now.